Should you start a business? What's happening, friends? Let's jump into this topic today. So I'm going to call this part one of should you start a business? And the reason being is there's a lot, obviously, of considerations on if you should start a business or if you should not start a business. But I'm going to talk about three things today that I usually ask people when they're first considering a business idea. Starting out right off the top with number one. Number one, is it a good idea? Well, okay, that one sounds a little obvious. That sounds a little plain Jane. But the reality is a lot of times we come up with business ideas and they may just not be good ideas. So how can you test if it's a good idea? One, talk to family and friends. But the truth is your family and friends may or may not really be the best people to talk to about this. It depends. Are they entrepreneurial? Are they business owners? Are they people who've had success starting and running companies? The people I would truthfully suggest to talk to, one, if you have a spouse, you obviously need to be in agreement if you're going to start a business. But two would be to talk to successful people that you know, people who are entrepreneurial. And honestly, they'll usually tell you the truth. Is it a good idea? Because they have walked it out and they know if you start something that is not a good idea, it's going to crash and burn, or it's going to be extremely painful to work through. And most people who've been entrepreneurial and who have owned companies know that, so they're not going to want you to make a bad decision. So is it a good idea? Is it unique? Is it a unique business venture that's going to stand out in the market? And it may or may not have to be super unique, which leads me to point number two. Is there a gap in the market? Is there a gap in your local market if it's a local company? So what do we mean by gap in the market? Is it something that is not currently being filled? So if you live in a local town and there's not a lot of restaurant options, well, it's a gap in the market. Let's say you work around people who have products, but they have a hard time getting them out. Maybe your gap in the market is starting a company that does shipping really well and that fulfills shipping. Whatever that is it a gap in the market? If it's a gap in the market, you have a much better chance of your business or your company working really well. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're the only company that does what you do. Restaurants are a perfect example. There's usually tons of restaurants, but maybe you serve a different kind of food that's not being served. Maybe you're a restaurant that's open later than everybody else. Whatever it is, look for a gap in the market. So we've covered, is it a good idea? Is it a gap in the market? Does it fill a gap in the market? Number three, this is another one that seems super obvious, but this is a real question that I often ask people. Are you willing to put in the work? The reality is being a business owner is a ton of work and often is very painful. Truthfully, the most successful business owners typically are the people who can handle the most pressure and stress and honestly can just hang on and endure longer than most other people. The reality is opening a business, unless you're opening what it would be a self-employed company, which isn't really a business, and we'll cover that in later things. I was self-employed for many years and didn't realize until someone told me I wasn't really a business owner until I opened a business that had staff and was a company and had its own sort of ecosystem and worked with or without me. That's when you have a business. When you're self-employed, I mean, if I went and did a photo shoot, I made money, I paid my bills. That was a pretty quick turnaround. But the reality is when you open a company, you often aren't taking money home right away, or you're definitely not taking profits home right away, depending on the structure of the business. There's exceptions to that, but typically you need to be able to either work another job and provide or have savings saved up to launch into your new business venture. So my three quick tips for today is, one, is it a good idea? Is it actually a good idea, or is it just a romantic, fun idea that you came up with that you love the idea of, but it may or may not last? Two, a gap in the market. Are you fulfilling something that doesn't exist or doesn't exist in the area that you're fulfilling it? And three, are you willing to put the work in? Are you willing to work 3 to 5 years if you're the operations person in the company, or you're just an investor? But if you're actually going to operate the company, it's going to take 3 to 5 years to build your company. Like the far majority of the time, that just is the truth. I've started a couple companies thinking I could build them in a year, and I have learned it just takes 3 to 5 years to build a company to a really good foundation. And you have to be willing to work it for 3 to 5 years if you're going to be the one who's going to operate the company. So, is it a good idea? Is there a gap in the market? Are you willing to put the work in and kind of go through, truthfully, the pain of running the company? So here's three things to think about. We'll talk a lot more. We'll make a part 2, 3, and 4 to should I own a business? Should I open a business? But a few things to think about. Much love. Hope you guys are doing well. I'll chat with you later.